This afternoon, I have had a spontaneous moment, and I wanted to discuss some things a little bit. For those who may not be aware, this is Black Breastfeeding Week, I believe from August the 25th to the 31st. And, basically we're those who are really active in the community, offline and online, are really getting out there and really pushing and working just to make, to expand the awareness of breastfeeding within the Black community. Okay. I was on my Facebook page a day or two ago. No, actually this was yesterday, early yesterday. And I came across a thread on a breastfeeding page. Yeah, on a page that was promoting breastfeeding, where the page owner was sharing, promoting the awareness of the Black Breastfeeding Week. Now, this was not a page that was dedicated to only, to specifically Black mothers. And so there, the thread turned into a really huge, brawl argument. There was just a lot of confusion going on as to why Black mothers needed a Black Breastfeeding Week. Now, there was a breastfeeding week a few weeks ago, and so there were a lot of mothers who, were kind of going back and forth with why, because there was already a breastfeeding week, why did there have to be now a Black Breastfeeding Week? And so there was a lot of back and forth where there are mothers of African descent explaining some different things, sharing some different things, and they were very, there were some rude comments made, and just a lot of things that went on that just, when I didn't read the whole thing because they had to be, at least at that time, there were at least 500 comments. And after reading some of the comments, I kind of had to just take a breath for a moment, because it was very disheartening, to say the least. I'm not one of those, who watch my 50 random facts. That I'm not keen on using labels. I don't like using labels, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to have to say black and white, okay? But there were some, white mothers who, seem to sincerely, want to understand the plight of Black mothers. There were some that kind of shared that they had no idea, that this, racism and the different struggles that we go through, that these things still went on. And they seem to be somewhat genuine about, wanting to understand and, not understanding and whatnot. On one angle, I love everyone, and you can go back and you can check my videos. I am a loving person, and there is not a mother that I would not speak to or, hug or kiss or, there just isn't. There's not a person that I could, have any issue with because of the color of their skin. But then on the other end of the coin, I do realize that I am a woman or a mother of African descent, and I do understand that the community that I am a part of, in terms of, whose blood flows through, I share blood with, I understand the issues that we deal with. Okay, I understand the disparities and all the different things that we, encounter and the things that we're up against, I guess, more so in a societal way. I am not one, to publicly speak on like black and white and to call out racial, ethnic, different ethnicities and so forth and so on. That is really not, that's just not how I do things. That's just not how I operate. And, even with the name that I have called myself, which is Mother Culture One, or the name that that represents me, this title, Mother Culture One, is basically supposed to be synonymous with the culture, or the feminine culture, or the feminine energy in and of itself. Okay, so they're, and this is on a worldwide, in a worldwide way. So what I'm about is just expanding that feminine awareness, period. But I do realize that in expanding our feminine awareness and expanding our understanding of who we are as females, as women, partners, to our significant others, there has to be an understanding of those things that we have come from our past, our ancestors, and that's just the truth. There's really no getting around it, okay? And so this is where, for me, I've kind of, it's funny because I've had to kind of walk the line of both. I have had to walk both lines, because for those who are not aware, this is something that I'm also going to be promoting. A sister, beautiful sister, African Moon, she is right now working on a documentary called The History of My Chocolate Milk. It's a breastfeeding film, and it's a work in progress right now. And there's some very, very, I'm going to actually put the link to the trailer below the video, so definitely check it out. But even within the trailer itself, the statement that continues to be made is that we have to understand our history. We have to understand where we have come from. We have to understand the plight of our ancestors. Okay, we have to understand our greatness. We have to understand, not just the slavery. We have to understand what was before that. And of course, we know that here, in particularly in America, when it comes to African American history, the tendency as a society is to only go back so far as slavery, and I know I did. And whenever I thought of my family, my greats, I only thought of cotton fields. I never dared to think about before that, because I didn't know anything about before that. Okay, it has expanded my ability to nurture and nourish and care for my own children. I have 8 of them, just with the awareness of what my culture really and truly has been and is about, and it is empowering to anybody, when they understand that there is a greatness that they have come from, that it is not only about, being underneath a whip or being paid to breastfeed someone's child and not being given the opportunity to care and nurture for your own children. That is just, that's just a matter of fact. There's no way to get around it, okay? And to act like those things have not existed, those things don't exist, is, it is just to be ignorant. It basically is to be ignorant. And unfortunately, that is what we're dealing with right now. And even in the middle of all of the ascension and everybody trying to raise their vibrations, even amongst all of this going on, there is still a population who remain unaware that we all feel, mothers who are proactive, feel compelled to get out there and to help. Kind of question whether or not I was actually going to read this article, but what happens is a sister, I believe her name is Kimberly Seals Allers. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly. She wrote an article or a letter basically sharing why it is that she feels it is important that we have a Black Breastfeeding Week. Okay, I do want to read this. I'm actually going to post the link to it in the bottom of the video description box. But I do want to read this because I think that it is important. I think it's important for that awareness to be out there. Of course, there are those who know, and for you, this definitely would not be for you. But for those who may not know, I read this letter and I share this letter. And of course, for those who know, I encourage you to please share the link or share the video, what have you. But I believe that it is important. Okay, I'm going to just start reading from the top here. And I just ask that you bear with me as I read through this. I'm going to try and make this really quick here. But it basically states, "Dear white women, top 5 reasons why we need a Black Breastfeeding Week. Okay, the news had not been posted for 2 hours before the brouhaha began on Facebook. Yesterday, myself and 2 of my comrades in the movement to shift breastfeeding culture in the Black community officially announced August 25th through the 31st, the last week of National Breastfeeding Awareness Month, as Black Breastfeeding Week. About 2 weeks ago, I wrote a piece suggesting the need for Black Breastfeeding Week as a way to highlight awareness to a community that desperately needs more breastfed babies. Days later, while attending the Rose Summit in Atlanta, I sat with Kidada Green, founder of Detroit's Black Mothers Breastfeeding Association, and Anaya Sangodale Ayoka, co-founder of the Brown Mamas Breastfed Project and Free to Breastfeed. In our excitement and passion for saving Black babies, we agreed to launch it this year. The week will be marked with celebratory first bump images to be shared on Facebook, a live interactive webcast via YouTube, and a groundbreaking Twitter chat under the inaugural theme, Black Lives Matter. Okay. But before we could finish uploading the images, there was already a ruckus brewing over at the Leaky Boob there was already a ruckus brewing over at the Leaky Boob Facebook page with over 500 and counting divisive comments, many of which were removed by the page administrator because of the racist connotations. Let me say this. In general, it is tragic to see white people try to tell Black people what we do and do not need. To be clear, this is not about you. This effort does not exclude or preclude anyone else from joining in. Please hear me. Every time Black people get together in solidarity to address problems in their own community, it is not a statement or action toward you. In fact, your energy would be better spent thinking about how you can support such a life-saving effort. Now to the specifics of breastfeeding. It is not a secret that for over 40 years there has been a gaping racial disparity in breastfeeding rates. The most recent CDC data shows that 75% of white women have ever breastfed versus 58.9% of Black women. The fact that racial disparity in initiation and even bigger one for duration has lingered for so long is reason enough to take 7 days to focus on the issue. But for those who may be confused by their view from suburbia, blinded by their white privilege or otherwise need for more convincing, I've put together the top 5 reasons why we need a Black Breastfeeding Week. Okay, number 5. Black babies are dying at twice the rate, in some places nearly triple the rate of white babies. This is a fact. The high infant mortality rate among Black infants is mostly to their being disproportionately born too small, too sick, or too soon. These babies need the immunities and nutritional benefit of breast milk the most. According to the CDC, increased breastfeeding among Black women could decrease infant mortality rates by as much as 50%. So when I say breastfeeding is a life or death matter, this is what I mean. And it is not up for debate or commenting. This is the only reason I have ever needed to do this work, but I will continue with the list anyway. Number 4, when you look at all the health conditions that breast milk, as the most complete first food, has been proven to reduce the risks of, African American children have them the most. From upper respiratory infections and type 2 diabetes to asthma, sudden infant death syndrome, and childhood obesity, these issues are rampant in our communities. And breast milk is the best preventative medicine nature provides. This is a public health issue in our community, not a lifestyle choice. For your information, Black women don't always have those. Number 3, not only are there blatant racial disparities in breastfeeding rates, there is a blatant disparity in breastfeeding leadership as well. It is not debatable that breastfeeding advocacy is white female-led. This is a problem. For one, it unfortunately perpetuates the common misconception that Black women don't breastfeed. It also means that many of the lactation professionals, though well-intentioned, are not culturally competent, sensitive, or relevant enough to properly deal with African American moms. This is a week to discuss the lack of diversity among lactation consultants and to change our narrative. A time to highlight, celebrate, and showcase the breastfeeding champions in our community who are often invisible, and to make sure that breastfeeding leadership also reflects the same parity we seek among women who breastfeed. Number 2, while many of the quote-unquote booby traps to breastfeeding are universal, Black women also have unique cultural barriers and a complex history connected to breastfeeding. From our role as wet nurses in slavery, being forced to breastfeed and nurture our own slave owners' children, often to the detriment of our own children, to the lack of mainstream role models and multi-generational support, to our own stereotyping within our community, we have a different dialogue around breastfeeding, and it needs special attention. Number 1, many African American communities are quote-unquote first food deserts. It's a term I coined to describe the desert-like conditions in many urban areas I visited where women cannot access support for the best first food, breast milk. It is not fair to ask women, any woman, to breastfeed when she lives in a community that is devoid of support. It is set up for failure. Please watch this video and educate yourselves on the conditions in many vulnerable communities about what you can do beyond leaving comments on blogs to help transform these areas from first food deserts into first food friendly neighborhoods. And the bonus number 1 reason why we need a Black Breastfeeding Week is because we said so. We, the people who are from and of the Black community, those of us who are respected for leading the charge in increasing breastfeeding rates among Black women, those of us who are on the ground doing the work and working for change, those of us who have faced the cultural struggles while breastfeeding our own children and want something better for future mothers and babies. I'm confident that the majority of people who are complaining about Black Breastfeeding Week haven't seen what I've seen. They haven't driven 30 miles outside Birmingham, Alabama, just to find a breastfeeding support group, or other urban areas where La Leche League just doesn't exist. They haven't held a premature baby who desperately needs breast milk but keeps spitting up formula. They haven't stood on street corners in front of WIC centers or WIC offices surveying new mothers and fathers who said that their doctors never even gave them information about breastfeeding. They have likely never stepped into a Black community or a Black home or a Black church to understand the lack of resources available or the negative sentiment and myths that linger about breastfeeding. So until you have walked where I have walked, seen what I have seen, and stood where I have stood, please do not have the audacity to tell me and my community what we do and do not need. Yes, we are all in this together, but some of us need more attention to get us there. In Motherhood, Kimberly Seals Allers. Racial issues is not something that has been a very, very, very huge part of my past, my childhood. When I grew up, I basically grew up in a neighborhood, if I can recall my block, where we had white families, we had Spanish families, we had Indians, we had Indian families, I really hate all the names, but we had a mix of, I believe there might have even been a few Asian families on the block. So the block that I grew up in, and I basically, where I lived at is where I was born until I basically married. So this is where I spent most of my life. And so because of kind of growing up in a very diverse environment, I never really experienced racial issues firsthand. I can say the same as far as this, the schools that I went to, especially as an adolescent. They were always very mixed. It was a very mixed neighborhood, and as well as the church that we eventually ended at. It was a very, very mixed, large, non-denominational congregation. So I never really experienced, my life was never really experienced, in a black-only community, or primarily around white folks, it was always very diverse. I want to say that when I did become familiar with what prejudice could feel like, or what it actually looks like, I was already at the age where I had a more expanded view of myself. And so when in the middle of facing the discrimination, it just didn't affect me in that way. It didn't move me. I was very able to look through that and to look into the heart of the person and see, okay, this person is behaving in this way because of himself, okay? And at that particular time, it was much easier for me to just to look at folk and if I ever received any type of negativity, to put it on them. It was not something that was a part of me. And this was much older in age, okay? Where this becomes, I guess, more of a direct issue for me is that I do have sisters who are close to me that, have backgrounds where they have experienced perhaps more, racial issues, many of the different things that I just now read. And not only that, but, to some degree it leaves a sink in my heart when I receive messages or inboxes, which I regularly do, let me say that, where there is a mother who, a black mother who, wants to move outside of the hospital, wants to do things more naturally, has no clue how to move forward. There are no resources around her. I can direct her to my website. I can share with her the things on my page. But I'm only one person, And so there have just been many times where, I try to be whatever support I can be to, a sister. But I realize that they're not exposed to what they need around them to enrich their birthing experience, to enrich their pregnancy, to enrich their birthing experience, to enrich their postpartum experience. And it hurts sometimes. It does hurt. It does bring a sadness to my heart at times when I, receive inboxes like that. Let me have him. Mommy's baby. This is my little boy who was upset because they had to go and wash him off. I just wanted to share that. This might have turned into something a little longer than what I was intending, but I just felt that it was important. It was something that I was really moved to do. After I read what I read yesterday, I was just really moved to share this. Again, remember, in the description box below the video, there's going to be links to all the different pages that I mentioned. If you're on Facebook, I will post some Facebook pages that you can support and help to promote. And if anything, if you are in touch with a mother that is pregnant, breastfeeding, please do what you can to share this information so that they can do the best thing they can do with more wisdom, for themselves and for their babies. Peace.